of a feedback mechanism. Example 2 is back to this blood glucose level. Okay. When our blood sugar gets too high, our pancreas releases insulin. And that insulin is going to take all that blood sugar and put it into cells, whether it be in our muscle cells or in our liver where it's stored. When it comes back to normal, our insulin shuts off, so it's no longer released. If a person's blood sugar is normally too high, they have something and need insulin injections. What's that? You guys know what that's called? Yes, diabetes. So if we have a problem with this homeostasis, or we have a problem regulating our sugar, we have a condition called diabetes. In some cases, it's regulated by insulin injections, or in some cases, you have issues with high blood sugars staying up all the time, which is not good for your body. Two good examples of this, and again, just to kind of reiterate, you might see questions or pictures like this. What is X pointing to? Yes, the pancreas. And what does the pancreas do?
Releases insulin.
Perfect. So you might see pictures that are associated with feedback mechanisms or homeostasis. This is also something. X releases insulin, which is going to decrease blood sugar. What releases insulin? X. So X is here, the actual physical representation of what a pancreas looks like, and this is one graphic way in which they say the pancreas releases insulin. And the third example of homeostasis, okay, guard cells, which is in the topic that we're in right now. Guard cells control the openings and leaves of plants. We do not have guard cells. We do not have these stomates. There are several gases, specifically carbon dioxide that goes in, oxygen that comes out, and water vapor that travels both in and out of these openings. And they're usually located, if you take a look here at the bottom picture here, at the bottom side of a leaf. So how does this maintain homeostasis? When there's a lot of rain, or not a lot of rain, excuse me, we call it a drought. So what happens is we don't want water to escape, so the guard cells are going to close the hole to conserve that water. If there's too much water, like the weather we've been having recently with the torrential downpours that we're getting, if there is enough water, the guard cells are going to open. Because what happens is, if we overwater our plants, it's going seeping through, right. So if it's coming up and it's getting stuck in the leaf because of all the rain that comes in, we have to open up those holes to let it out. So,
I know when I read that, I was like,
yeah, did I mess up? No. Thank goodness. Forever memorialized. Okay, so let's take a look. Down here, what was that hole again? Stomates, good. The hole is called the stomate, and then the ones on the side, that X, the X and the X are the guard cells. And if you recall back, we watched a short video on how those guard cells open and close. So that's the summary of homeostasis. Okay, continuing on, communication. Okay. Communication usually occurs with these things called neurons. Okay. So we have neuron here, and technically what happens is this neuron secretes this message, and that message has to adhere to some type of receptor molecule. So the two main types of communication are brought to you by the nervous system And we know it's the nervous system because we see these cells that are specific to the nervous system called neurons. So that's one way of communicating. The other way of communicating, which we've gone over before, is the endocrine system. The endocrine system is all about your hormones. So we have specific glands that will secrete specific chemicals that are going to respond to specific target organs. Okay. So, for example, testes secrete the chemical testosterone, which is transported in the blood to male secondary organs, which makes a change occur. So, for example, men are going to get deeper throats or deeper voices. Okay. Specifically, molecules are going to be able to fit together. We've done this example with throwing the ball. That ball is a chemical, and if you receive the message because your hand is shaped correctly, that's going to be the receptor. Okay, so those are our two types of communication systems. So how does this relate back to homeostasis? If we have certain things that are being secreted, we are responding to a change. So endocrine system is also responsible for that insulin that's being secreted by the pancreas gland. Okay. And last but not least, we talk about the immune system, which is a big component, especially when it comes to your regents, as well as questions that you'll see on your final. Your final is next Thursday and Friday, the 6th and the 7th. So let's talk about a couple of these things that can cause disease. First one I like to talk about is bacteria. Okay. So we can have strep bacteria. We can have MRSA, bad stuff. These can cause diseases and can cause a lot of issues. Other pathogens, let's say, let's just call them worms. We call those parasites. Other things that can cause disease, viruses.
And fungi?
Fungi, that's a good one. Okay. The best known fungi that affects human beings are your athlete's foot or ringworm. Ringworm is technically not a worm, it's a fungus. Just interesting fact. White blood cells. So we have a couple different white blood cells that you might come across with the terms with this. So white blood cells might be called a macrophage. B cells. T cells. If you remember, we briefly did an acting out skit where you had to be a specific type of white blood cell and you had to act out what you would do. You had to, search and destroy. One person had to put on an antibody that said, okay, you're marked for destruction, and then somebody would come in and destroy you. So the key terms here that you might see and might get confused are antigens and antibodies. Okay, antibodies have to basically fit an antigen. So they must have the same shape as the antigen that they're attaching to. So some examples of what's found in your blood. These are your red blood cells. These small little things are called your platelets that causes a clot. This big guy is called one of your white blood cells. And interestingly enough, that white blood cell can also look dramatically different in a lot of different areas here. So this white blood cell, we have something here, something here, something here. Turns out that if it comes in contact with any of these things, this is actually one of the white blood cells that's going to come in and actually go and destroy it. So you do not have to know specifically the B cells, T cells, macrophages, what they do, but you should know that there are 4 components of blood, and in some cases, this would be considered the antibody. But you might see antibodies in like a Y shape. And that shape has to be able to fit specific antigens, which are kind of the name tags of a cell. Okay, finishing up with immunity, vaccinations you have to know, and this is a term and a definition that you have to memorize. Vaccinations are made up of dead or weakened organisms.
Dakota Sealy, you're being picked up. Dakota Sealy, you're being picked up.
So vaccinations, ultimately we get one, sometimes as boosters, sometimes yearly when it comes to the flu. This causes an organism to make these antibodies that will attack the disease if you ever get introduced to it. So that is the key. Vaccinations, they are made up of dead or weakened organisms, and they cause an organism to make antibodies to attack a disease. Best known is HIV. It's caused by a pathogen that is actually a virus. HIV stands for Human Immunodeficient Virus. This is the virus that causes AIDS, and it attacks the person's immune system. So it destroys all of the white blood cells that are there to destroy the pathogen. A person with AIDS gets sick, and he or she might actually get it from exposure to blood, dirty needles, or unprotected sex. So you can prevent this by protecting yourself, against other bodily fluids, other people's bodily fluids. So that's saliva, that's blood, that's semen.
What's that say?
Preventing yourself against other people's...
Protecting.
Yeah, protecting yourself against other people's bodily fluids. So if it's not yours, don't touch it. Against other